Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we're diving into something that's honestly kind of urgent. We are looking at a growing crisis in modern governance, which is this massive, widening gap between what we expect from our institutions and what they're actually able to deliver. We're going to look at how rapidly evolving citizen demands, especially around education and digital infrastructure, are completely outpacing traditional systems. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how we can actually bridge that gap. Think for a second about your own daily routine. Have you ever tried to log into a government website and just found it impossibly clunky? Or maybe you've looked at a new local policy and thought, wow, the people who wrote this have clearly never lived in my neighborhood. Well, you definitely aren't alone. This is the central paradox of modern governance right now. Our world has become incredibly fast and interconnected, but the systems that are supposed to serve us often feel totally disconnected from our actual lived realities. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap. We'll look at the citizen expectation gap, then social inclusion and education, followed by digital realities and youth. After that, we'll talk about reimagining citizenship and stewardship, and finally wrap up with the citizen jury solution. Let's get to it. Starting off with Section 1, the citizen expectation gap. So, what exactly is this gap? Well, it's what happens when our demand for modern, fair services just completely outpaces an institution's ability to keep up. Take a look at this matrix. We've got domains like social inclusion and digital information. For both of these, citizen expectation is sky high. And it makes sense, right? These things affect our daily lives, our rights, the whole shebang. But then, look at the perceived performance. It's sitting at moderate or just emerging. When you expect a seamless digital experience or robust inclusion, and instead get something slow and exclusionary, it's a real problem. It actually creates a dangerous erosion of democratic trust. That brings us to Section 2, social inclusion and education. Now, social inclusion gets thrown around a lot as a buzzword, but it's a critical issue, especially with rising economic pressures. But here's the thing. What's really interesting about this data is our massive blind spot. Look at this. A staggering 93.1% of global research on this topic focuses entirely on Western context and the global North. Literally less than 7% looks at the rest of the world. So, our whole understanding of how to build inclusive societies is massively skewed. We're completely ignoring the lived experiences and unique challenges of the global South. And when we talk about inclusion, we really have to talk about education. But the data shows this fascinating, honestly pretty troubling contradiction that we can call the education paradox. On one hand, education is supposed to be this great enabler of inclusion, right? It gives you the skills to participate in civic life. But on the flip side, it actually acts as a massive barrier. Think about it. If getting involved in local governance requires you to understand incredibly complex technical jargon, that basically gatekeeps access. Research actually shows that these civic roles end up dominated by highly educated men over 50. Meanwhile, women, minorities, and young people are just structurally locked out. So education is kind of inadvertently perpetuating the exact exclusion it's supposed to fix. Wild, right? Moving right along to Section 3, digital realities and youth. Just like education, the digital divide is creating some really unexpected barriers. Citizens today expect digital platforms to be accessible and trustworthy. It's basically a standard of living now. But check out this youth digital paradox. You'd think young people, literal digital natives, would be totally fine with digital public services. Actually, the data shows the exact opposite. Younger citizens are reporting the highest levels of frustration and disappointment with e-services, while older users are mostly satisfied. Why? Because young people know what good tech actually looks like. They expect a seamless experience, proactive design, and real privacy protections. If a government app feels like it was built 10 years ago, young people don't just find it annoying, they see it as a total failure of governance. So how do we fix this deep frustration? Well, we have to totally overhaul how we measure digital success. In the past, institutions loved focusing on outputs, bragging about turning 1,000 paper forms into PDFs. But who cares if the PDF is impossible to use? We need to shift our metrics to outcomes. That means tracking actual citizen trust and satisfaction scores, prioritizing true user-centric design, and making absolutely sure data protection is rock solid. A good digital service shouldn't just be online. It needs to be proactive, secure, and centered entirely around what the citizen actually needs. Which brings us to Section 4, reimagining citizenship and stewardship. So the crucial point here is a concept called stewardship. Think of an organization as two separate islands. On one island, you've got the tech, product, and design folks. On the other island, you've got the operations and policy teams actually on the ground.
A lot of times, these islands don't even talk to each other, which leads to shiny new apps that totally fail in reality. Stewardship is the bridge between those islands. It's this coordinating role that makes sure digital innovations don't just exist in a vacuum, but are actually tied to real-world programs to create measurable impact.
And right alongside stewardship is something called climate citizenship. Now, don't let the name fool you. This isn't just about your carbon footprint. It's a much bigger mindset. It basically flips the script on what a citizen is. Instead of just being passive recipients of top-down rules, citizens become active co-creators. If we're going to solve these massive, complex problems, we literally have to use the collective intelligence and lived experience of the community. Systemic change only happens when the people actually affected by the policies get to help build them. And that leads perfectly into our final section, Section 5, the citizen jury solution. Okay, so what does this look like in practice? Enter the citizens jury. This is a brilliant tool for participatory governance. It recognizes that democracy isn't just voting every couple of years, it's a continuous collective effort. In a citizens jury, you bring together a diverse, representative group of everyday community members to deliberate on complex policies that affect their lives. They don't just give surface-level opinions. They get informed by experts, they debate, and then they produce collective recommendations. It's pretty amazing. Let's move to this breakdown and see how it completely flips the traditional power dynamic. Notice how diverse citizens are put firmly front and center. The experts are invited in, sure, but they aren't dictating the terms. They present their views, and then, crucially, the citizens actually get to interrogate the experts. This whole process prioritizes conversation and lived experience over top-down academic mandates. It takes the power away from just that highly educated demographic we talked about earlier and gives it right back to the broader community. To put that into perspective, let's look at a real-world, high-stakes example from our source material involving the Poshan Tracker app in India. The government wanted to mandate facial recognition for distributing health resources and rations. From a pure tech standpoint, sure, it sounds incredibly innovative. More data, right? But they convened a citizen jury made up of the actual users, Anganwadi healthcare workers, local citizens, and digital rights advocates. And man, the conversation completely shifted. They didn't look at the policy in a tech vacuum. They evaluated it against the harsh realities of spotty rural internet, low digital literacy, and super vague data privacy rules. There's this one powerful quote from an Anganwadi worker during the jury that just hits the nail on the head. They said, "The idea of using facial recognition sounds modern, but it doesn't consider the realities of rural India. We need tools that support us, not add to our burden." That is exactly why lived experience is so absolutely crucial. It humanizes the data. It shows us that without talking to the people on the ground, even the most modern tech can end up completely excluding and burdening the most vulnerable populations. So, wrapping up this explainer, how do we permanently bridge this expectation gap across our social, educational, and digital systems? Well, first off, we have to put people before technology every single time. We need to combine lived, on-the-ground experience with expert knowledge. You really can't have one without the other. We also need to redesign systems for true intersectional inclusion, getting rid of that educational gatekeeping we saw earlier. And finally, we've got to institutionalize tools like the citizen jury so that participatory governance becomes the absolute standard, not just a rare experiment. I'll leave you with this final thought. Democracy doesn't just run on autopilot. It needs our active participation. So what if you were called today to sit on a citizen's jury for your community's next big digital service or education policy? What blind spots would you see? How would your own unique lived experience completely change the outcome? It's a great reminder that when it comes to closing the expectation gap, your voice isn't just nice to have, it's absolutely essential. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep asking those big questions.